I should have stopped looking out that window weeks ago. That's what my wife said. She said I was losing sleep over nothing, that the mind plays tricks when you've been working 16-hour days under the sun. She said a lot of things. I stopped telling her what I saw after the third night because the way she looked at me, that quiet, careful look, scared me almost as much as the thing in the field. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd stayed up late fixing the irrigation line on the east side, and I was too wound up to sleep. I poured a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window, the way I always do when I can't shut my brain off, just staring out at the field, letting the dark settle me down. That's when I saw it. A figure, standing maybe 200 yards out, right in the middle of the soybean rows. Just standing there, still as a post. My first thought was the scarecrow. We'd had one out there years ago, but I took it down after the second season. Thing never worked anyway. My second thought was that one of the farm hands had left some equipment out there. A post maybe, a bundled tarp tied to a stake. I told myself that and went to bed. But the next night I looked again. It was still there. Same spot, same posture, arms loose at its sides, head tilted just slightly down like it was looking at the ground, or like it didn't have the strength to hold its head up. I stood at that window for 10 minutes watching it. It didn't move. Not once. I went out the next morning and walked the field. I found the spot. I knew exactly where it had been standing. The beans were pressed down in a rough circle like something heavy had rested there. But there were no footprints. No marks in the soil between the road and that circle. Just the pressed down plants and then nothing. I told myself it was wind damage. I went back inside and didn't look out the window that night. But the night after, I did. It was closer. Not by much. Maybe 20, 30 yards. But I knew that field the way I knew my own hands, and it was not standing in the same spot. I pressed my face to the glass and stared until my eyes burned. The figure didn't move. It just stood there in the dark, head tilted, arms at its sides. I watched it for an hour. It never moved, but every night after that it was closer. I started marking it. I'd note what row it was standing near, and by the end of the second week, it had crossed nearly 100 yards in 10 nights. Always still when I was watching. Always slightly closer when I first caught sight of it. I stopped sleeping. I'd sit at the window in the dark, trying to catch it move. I never did. I'd blink or look down at my coffee, and when I looked back up, I'd convince myself it was in the same place. But by the next night, it was always closer. My wife asked me why I looked so bad. I told her the irrigation was still giving me trouble. On the 15th night, it was close enough that I could make out its shape more clearly. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like dark clothing, though in the moonlight, it was hard to say. Its head was still tilted down. I couldn't see a face. I decided I was done being afraid of it. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my flashlight, and walked out the back door. The night was warm, and the field smelled like soil and something faintly sweet, like cut grass gone wrong. I swept the flashlight ahead of me and walked toward it. My heart was slamming, but my legs kept moving because I am not the kind of man who stands at a window and shakes. I've lived on this land for 30 years. Whatever was out there, I was going to face it. I was halfway across the field when I stopped. I'd been looking at it the whole time. The shape, still and dark against the night sky. And something was wrong. Something I couldn't name at first. I stood there with the flashlight trembling in my hand, and I made myself think it through. Then I looked down. The soil around me was soft from the last rain. My own boots had left a clear trail behind me, deep and clean, stretching back toward the house. I looked at the figure. I looked at the ground between us. No footprints, no marks, no trail leading out to where it stood. Just flat, untouched soil between me and the shape. I moved the flashlight slow across the ground row by row. And that's when I understood. The prints weren't leading into the field. They were leading away from it. Small, narrow, pressed deep, like something that walked heavy and slow. They came from behind, where the figure stood, from the far edge of the field, the far tree line, and they moved in a straight line, row by row, night by night, toward my house. The figure wasn't walking out of the darkness. It had never been walking toward me. It had been walking toward my house every night, while I stood at the window watching it, while my wife slept upstairs, while I thought I was keeping track of something that was standing still. I turned around. Every light in the house was off. The windows were black and quiet. And at the very edge of the back porch, standing just where the light from the kitchen window would reach on any other night, standing right beside the door I had walked out of 10 minutes ago, there was another shape, still, tall, head tilted down. I don't know how long it had been there. I don't know how long it had been standing that close. I ran. I don't remember crossing the field. I remember hitting the back door, slamming it behind me, screaming my wife's name until she came down the stairs, pale-faced and terrified. I remember checking every lock, every window, every room. We didn't find anything. But the next morning, I looked at the back porch. The soil along the edge was soft, and there were prints right outside the door, deep ones, facing in. I bought that house because I wanted my daughter to grow up with space. That's all it was. No deeper reason than that. We'd been crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment in the city for 6 years, and when the countryside listing came up, 4 acres, old farmhouse, priced under market, I didn't even wait for the second showing. I signed the papers and told my wife Rachel that this was it. This was the life we'd been talking about. She said the backyard felt strange. I told her it just needed work. The well was already there when we moved in. Stone-rimmed, maybe 3 feet across, sitting about 40 yards from the back of the house with a rotted wooden cover, half collapsed, over the top. The real estate agent said it had been dry for decades. I asked if it needed to be filled in. She said most people just left them. I should have filled it in. The first night I heard something, I thought it was an animal. We were in unfamiliar territory. New sounds, new dark, wind moving through trees we hadn't learned yet. It was around 2 in the morning, and I heard what sounded like something falling. A dull, hollow plunk, like a stone dropping into water. I lay there and listened, and heard nothing else. And eventually I fell back asleep. The second night, I heard it again. Same sound, same time roughly. I got up and stood at the bedroom window and looked out at the backyard. The well was just a dark shape in the moonlight. Quiet. Still. I watched it for a few minutes and went back to bed. The third night I heard the echo. That was different. It wasn't just the drop. It was what came after. A low, long sound, rising up from somewhere below like the well was breathing out. I told myself it was wind moving through the shaft. Old wells do that. I'd read that somewhere. Or maybe I just told myself I had. I didn't tell Rachel. She was already saying the house felt off. I didn't want to add to it. But then our daughter Mia started talking about the sounds. She was 6. She slept in the room closest to the backyard, and one morning at breakfast, she told us she'd heard someone calling her name at night. She said it like it was nothing, the way kids say things that stop your heart completely. Just matter of fact, spooning cereal, not even looking up. Rachel looked at me across the table. I asked Mia what she meant. She said sometimes at night she heard someone outside saying her name, and it sounded like it was coming from far away, like the person was at the bottom of something. She used those exact words, at the bottom of something. I went outside that morning and pulled the rotted cover off the well. I shone my flashlight down into it. Stone walls, dark, going down maybe 30 feet before the light gave out. Dry, like the agent said. No water, no movement, just the smell of cold earth and something faintly damp and wrong. I put a new cover on it that afternoon. Heavy plywood weighted down with 2 cinder blocks. That night I heard the sound again. The drop, then the echo. Then, and I need you to understand that I am not someone who imagines things. A voice, faint, rising like someone calling from a very long way down, the way a sound warps when it travels too far. I couldn't make out words, but the shape of it sounded like a name. I didn't sleep. The next morning, Mia came downstairs and told me the person in the well knew her name. I sat down next to her and kept my voice very calm and asked her what she meant. She said, I went to the window last night and listened, and they said my name. They know my name, Daddy. How do they know my name? I had no answer for that. I called Rachel into the kitchen and told her everything. The sounds, the voice, all of it. She didn't say I told you so. She just stood there with her arms crossed tight over her chest, staring out the back window at the well. Then she said we needed to look inside it. That night, after Mia was in bed, we went out together. I pulled the cinder blocks off and lifted the cover. Rachel held the big flashlight while I leaned over the rim and shone it straight down. The beam went down 30 feet, just like before. And then I saw it. Movement, far below. Deeper than the light should have been reaching. Deeper than a well this size had any right to go. Something shifting in the dark below the dark. Not water, not an animal. Something with shape. Something with intention. I grabbed Rachel's arm without meaning to. The movement stopped. And then, from somewhere impossibly far below, further than 30 feet, further than the ground beneath us should have allowed, something called Mia's name. Clear, patient, like it had been practicing. We sold the house 43 days later. We took a loss. I didn't care. Rachel didn't care. We packed Mia's room first, and when I carried the last box out through the back door, I made myself not look at the well. I almost made it. I don't know why I turned around. Some pull I couldn't explain. I looked at the well from across the yard, the cover sitting flat and waited in the morning light. The 2 cinder blocks had been moved, stacked neatly to the side, and the cover was sitting slightly off-center, like something had pushed it from underneath. We drove away and I didn't look in the rearview mirror once. But that night, in the hotel, Mia woke up crying. I asked her what was wrong. She said she could still hear it. She said it was getting closer. I didn't tell my parents for 2 weeks. Looking back, that was my first mistake. But I was 17 and I didn't want to sound crazy, and honestly, at first, it didn't seem like anything worth mentioning. Old barns make noise. Everybody knows that. Wood shifts, wind moves through gaps in the siding, animals get inside. I'd grown up on that property, and the barn had always groaned and settled at night like something trying to get comfortable. I was used to it. What I wasn't used to was the talking. It started on a Thursday in late October. I was coming back from the far fence line around 9 at night. I'd gone out to check on one of the goats. My dad kept penned on the south side, and I passed close to the barn on my way back to the house. That's when I heard it, low and muffled, like a conversation happening just on the other side of a wall. 2 voices, maybe 3. I couldn't make out words, just the rhythm of it. The rise and fall of people talking. I stopped walking and listened. It stopped. I stood there in the dark for a full minute. Nothing. Just the wind and the distant sound of the goats and my own breathing. I told myself it was the radio from the Henderson's place, half a mile down the road, carrying weird in the night air, the way sound sometimes does out in the country. I went inside and didn't think much more about it. But the next night it was there again, and the night after that. By the end of the first week, I'd accepted that something was making that sound every night. I just hadn't let myself look too closely at what it was. It was easier to keep walking past, easier to keep my eyes on the house lights and my feet moving and my brain quiet. Then it said my name. I was maybe 15 feet from the barn door when it happened. One word, clean and distinct, rising out of that low murmur, like it had been waiting for me to get close enough to hear it properly. My name, said the way a person says it when they want your attention. Not shouted, not whispered, just said. I stopped breathing. The murmuring continued underneath, like a background that never turned off. But my name came again. Same tone, same patience. And I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the October air. I went inside and locked the back door and sat at the kitchen table until my mom came in and asked why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I told her I was just tired. I went back the next night because I needed to know. That's the thing about being 17. You're just old enough to be stubborn and just young enough to be stupid about it. I told myself I'd listen from outside, figure out what it was, and that would be the end of it. I stood by the barn wall and listened. It knew things. That's the only way I can say it. The voice, one voice now, the other's gone quiet, was whispering things it had no business knowing. Small things, personal things. The name of the girl I'd liked since 9th grade. The argument I'd had with my dad in July that nobody else had heard. The thing I'd done when I was 12 that I'd never told anyone. Not once, not ever. Each one dropped into the dark like a stone into still water. No reaction waiting for, no question being asked. Just the facts of my life, laid out in the dark by something that had no right to them. My legs were shaking by the time I made myself move. I pulled the barn door open. Empty. Just the smell of old hay and dust, and something faintly animal. Pale moonlight coming through the gaps in the roof. The tools hanging on the back wall exactly where they always were. I walked every inch of that barn with my flashlight and found nothing. No person, no animal big enough to matter, no radio, no speaker, no explanation of any kind. I I stood in the middle of that empty space and listened. Silence. I went back to the house and told myself it was over. For 2 nights, it was quiet. I started to relax. I started sleeping again. I even convinced myself that the thing I'd heard whispering my secrets had been some strange product of exhaustion and an overactive imagination. 17-year-old alone in the dark on a rural property. Of course the brain starts misfiring. Of course it does. Then, on the 3rd night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of my mother's voice, coming from inside my bedroom wall. Not from outside, not from the hallway, from inside the wall, the way a sound comes through plaster when someone is speaking in the next room, pressed up close to the other side. Her voice, her exact cadence, the way she drew out certain words, the particular sound of her when she was talking low so as not to wake anyone. She was saying my name, over and over, patient, unhurried. I sat up in bed and pressed my back against the headboard and stared at the wall and did not move for a very long time. In the morning, I went to my mom before she'd even started the coffee and asked if she'd been up in the night. She said no. She asked why I looked the way I looked. I told her about all of it, the barn, the voices, the whispering, everything. I watched her expression shift in a way I hadn't seen before, not disbelief, something quieter and more careful than that. She put down the coffee mug and said, "I heard it too last night." I asked her what it said. She looked at me for a long moment. "It was using your voice," she said. It was calling my name. We called my dad in from the back field, and the 3 of us sat at the kitchen table and compared what we'd each been hearing. My dad had thought it was the radio. My mom had thought it was me sleepwalking and talking. We'd each been explaining it away in our own private heads for days, none of us saying a word to the others. That night we all heard it, from different walls, different rooms, all at the same time, which meant it wasn't one of us, couldn't be one of us. My dad went through the house with a flashlight and found nothing. My mom sat with me in the kitchen and held my hand and didn't say anything. We listened to it move, room to room, wall to wall, learning our voices, practicing. We were in a rental by the end of the week. My dad hired someone to go through the house, and the barn inspector, not a priest, because he's a practical man. They found nothing wrong with the structure. No animals, no mold causing hallucinations, no explanation. We never went back to live there. But about a month after we left, my dad got a call from the property. He'd kept the utilities running while he figured out what to do with the place. The automated system flagged unusual activity on the account. Apparently, the electricity usage had spiked significantly in the weeks since we'd left. Something in that house was still running. He asked the utility company which part of the property was drawing the most power. They said it was the barn.